Over here in the Cedar Dugout area, Belding's Reef, third chain of islands, all the shell that's in here. We've had a lot of variation in water levels this past week. It's been a pretty interesting week. It's not been too terribly cool, but it's been comfortable. Water temps are hanging in the upper 60s, mid 70s throughout the day, and we've taken advantage of that in some of these areas. This reef here, where Belding's Reef, if you will, or Cedar Dugout, whichever one you would want to refer to it as. It's all third chain to me. But we just worked these areas here, been working the drops, working the edges. Those fish are still hanging in and around that shell. Once we had some little bit cooler air, water temps dipped down just a couple of days, and then they rebounded back. But those fish are, I think I said before, those fish are starting to really migrate toward the mud and the grass primarily. And starting to get away from shell. But with these water temps being in the upper 60s, low 70s, we got back on some of these shell here just to see if these fish are holding out. Now, if you fish in here a lot, you know that there is mud in here, and it makes sense for those fish to be on top of that. So that's why we kind of try to take advantage of it if we can. And we caught some decent fish that's in here. A lot of a box fish, and an occasional black drum, and of course your redfish are in there as well. But like I say, with just an area that we really kind of wanted to see more than anything else, to see if those fish are still in and around that, which they are, and that'll continue to be the case. As say, we don't have any really cold air that's moving our way, at least not at the moment anyway. And so just continue to look for these types of areas moving forward. Again, the colder air is going to get here at some point in time, and when it does, it'll change quite a bit as far as the fishing goes. But main things that we were pushing this past week, we were throwing Little John XLs in multiple different flavors, 16th ounce jig head, Double D, we were throwing it. We were throwing the knock and tail lures. Main two flavors that were working well for us was the greenback and the heavy metal in it. Rogue was okay. It wasn't as productive as what the other two flavors were, but we could still find and catch some fish on it. The Soft Dine XL has come into play for us. It's been pretty productive for the most part, and of course our down south has been money for us for a while. So. And we've worked it in different sizes too. The Big Smooth has been pretty good, especially in this new moon phase that we are in. So that's the 10 best days each month is the new moon phase. So we took advantage of that, fishing around those minors in that time frame, taking advantage of it. But it's kind of early morning and midday, working around the major and the minor. It's been a big thing for us. And then just kind of in between those time frames, we just kind of went to a little bit smaller bait and just kind of grinded some areas out up in here and just kind of worked this area. Fished up here in Carlos as well, worked this shoreline. We've had some past north breeze in here, so it kind of set up well for us all the way to the point over to the fingers of Carlos up in this area here. But like I said, we're just working all these areas, taking our time with it, not doing anything too aggressive. Just letting the fish dictate to us and just kind of paying attention to what they were really wanting and how they were going about their day. We were pretty much knee to thigh deep water since our water level had dropped out, or really kind of got back to what I consider a normal tide this time of year. So in the water's holding for you. So it's been good. Again, paying attention to what your tides are, moving into each day is important. To make sure that you can either A, eliminate some water, or B, set you up into some areas where you think there might be some fish holding for you. Like I say, we've just been working around the shell, working the drop edges of the shell, and just kind of hanging on off the edge of those types of things. The flavors in the down south that we were throwing bone diamond mostly. It did pretty well for us. And then, of course, if we had that clean, clearer water, we were throwing stuff that was a little bit more translucent, and that would help us with that. And of course, the darker baits, watermelon red was another good one for us. Big Papa was another good flavor for us. Watermelon, I think that's watermelon red was good as well. So just a lot of different things flavor-wise. We just kind of keep your box with a variation of stuff that's in there, both profile and color, and then that way that you can, whatever the water's clarity is to you or what's going on with that, that you can you have a way to fish that and be productive with it. The Allen Bight area on the outside and on the inside, but we spent more time on the outside here working down the grass line edge. Lots of potholes, lots of great opportunities that are up and down the shoreline. You got a long shoreline if you fished out this area, which I'm sure a lot of you, if you're listening to this, you have. Just different points in times. Some of these areas, once it gets colder, some of these areas just don't do as well. But right now, again, fish are still holding over this type of structure. Like I say, grass, potholes, a little bit harder structure here. It's not true mud completely like in some of the other areas like you would get to, like say in your back lake areas. But like I say, we're just kind of fishing the grass beds, a little bit deeper water, and see if we can't find fish there. And we have. There's been a few fish that are hanging out here on the edges of that thing. Just working up and down the shoreline, man. When we've had opportunities, we've walked back out here in the back lakes and worked some of these. I like to get back in here and throw the topwater baits on those shallower back lakes like this. And then, of course, you got some little guts in there that set up pretty well for you. You can throw your plastics or double D or whatever other baits go. Of course, the other thing you have to contend with right now is duck hunters. There's a lot of duck hunters in these back lakes. So always be aware of that. Like I say, we spend a little time back in here walking mainly, just leaving the boat in a little bit deeper water so we don't have to worry about trying to get it up in the shallower stuff. Like I say, our water levels have dropped or gotten to a normal this time of year tide. So a lot of these areas are pretty skinny. But like I say, if you fish back in here, you know that there's guts back in here, and you can fish those guts and work those. That's one of the advantages of the water level dropping and staying at a shallower point. Those fish will concentrate for you no matter, I don't care where you're fishing, whether you're fishing up in this area, or if you're fishing up in the Estes area, if you're fishing over in the upper Laguna area. If you've got areas that's got little deeper guts and cuts, once that water level drops out, those fish will concentrate for you. And especially when it gets chilly, they'll do that too. But we just kind of concentrate our time frame on this and just kind of see what's going on with it. Bait hasn't left our estuaries yet. It hadn't really truly migrated out. There's still a ton of bait that's in here. That'll change once we get a really nice cold front and it stays cold for a few days. But until that takes place, that bait is still hanging out for us. So we're taking advantage of that as well. And same thing I mentioned earlier, the same baits in the down south and those flavors, the knock and tail, the double D, the Little John XL have been really good for us in this past week and a half. It's really produced. So if you have those in different flavors, throw those. Of course, and then another thing that I really like to throw this time of year, the colder months, is the soft dine and soft dine XL. But again, which I've made mention in the past, is make sure you have 2 or 3 of those, because if you get into some redfish, they will crush it. And it doesn't last really long in their mouths. So anyway, always be prepared for that kind of stuff. Again, weather patterns are always important this time of year. So pay attention to when those pre-fronts are happening and post-fronts, and how you approach and how you work those time frames. Make sure you set yourself up for the best possible situation. Shell Point, Turtle Pen area, all this back in here. Again, this is another one of those areas when it gets down to this time of year, you've got the right type of structure. You've got the mud, you've got some clump shell that's in there, you've got grass, a little hard pack that's in there as well. So it kind of is a good transition spot, because you can fish it both kind of ways depending on what your temps are, what your weather patterns are. We like to work these little back lake mouths, which I've talked about this back here in Turtle Pen before. You've got a couple of back lakes that are here. The mouths can be really good, but they're really mushy and muddy, so you have to be careful of those. And again, with the water levels being what they are, some of these fish have kind of congregated to that. So we've pulled out a few redfish out of this area, some smaller box trout, if you will. Nothing big, but just fun. And then, of course, one of my favorite areas to fish back in this is this whole back shoreline here in Turtle Pen, because you've got a nice little grass flat that's kind of mushy. Those fish like to get up on top of that, especially if you've got colder water. As the day progresses, that sun will get in there and it'll bake on it, and it'll warm that water up, so those fish come in that deeper edge or deeper water and get up here and fish that. So it's always important when you got colder air is making sure you kind of time when you're going to be in a particular area. So let the sunshine bake on some of those areas like that for you. They kind of help you out. And of course, as you move down this shoreline, you got another back lake mouth or two that dump out into this, and then you got this nice little gut that goes back toward Copano Creek. It's all back in here. Now, this area back in here in the Copano Creek flat, if you will, with the tides that we have, has been kind of difficult to fish. Now we've weighted it, but it hadn't been too productive. But most of the fish have kind of stayed out here on this outer edge, and of course this flat right here that runs you all the way around. Of course, we'll get on the edge of that, and there's a nice little drop that's on it. We found some fish that are on that, and that's just kind of been our game plan. That's how we've attacked this. Depending on, and of course, you can fish a lot of different ways depending on what your wind is and where it's coming from. So always kind of set your day up depending on a particular area that you want to fish. If you want to try to hit multiple locations, then based on that game plan, you'll go from there. But again, the flavors that we've been using in the product that we've been using, been the Down South, Twisted Tea, Big Papa, White Ice, Bone Diamond. Bone Diamond's been pretty good for the most part. Then, of course, in the Little John XL, in multiple flavors of that, depending on what our water clarity is. Double D's been good for us in a couple of different flavors. Pistachio specifically has been pretty good, if I remember correctly. And then, of course, the Knock and Tail lures have been good for us. And that's, just a good standby of them, of course. And then the Soft Dine XL. Other people, you like the Corkies. Corky Devils is another one that I like to throw. Haven't thrown a lot of the Devil. Just a couple of times over the past week or so. We had some really kind of chilly water for a couple of days. I threw it. Nothing really super productive off of it just yet, but that time is coming for that bait. But anyhow, remember how you set your box up and just kind of get that where it's squared away for you. We've got multiple sizes and flavors and profiles that are in that depending on what's going on. Work your majors and minors. Pay attention to what your bait situation is. Again, when we get some really cold air and cold water, that bait will migrate out. But right now, still take advantage that you have a lot of bait still in our system.